Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everyone online. We should turn it. أعوذ من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, we shall start off with Surah Al-Fatiha. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. 4 days in, how are we doing? All right? Good? Feeling all right? And strong? Fascias, so. Listen, that's real. That is real, right? For those who are navigating the fast, I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts from you, makes your fast easy for you in whatever way you're acknowledging the month of Ramadan, right? That Allah makes it easy for you, because we know that each and every single one of us, we come into the month of Ramadan differently, whether we are fasting or not, whether we are able to do extra ibadat or not. However, we come into the month of Ramadan, I pray that Allah makes everything that we do magnified and easier for us, so that it weighs heavily on our scale of good on the day of judgment. Ameen, ameen, ameen. And I know we all got the emergency notification today about the water. So inshallah, we are only serving bottled water. Let me stop. Yes, so there's no tap water being served for iftar today, inshallah. But even with that, right, we pray that anyone who is suffering any adverse effects from that spill in the Delaware River, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for them, allows the issue to be remedied quickly, and prevents anyone from getting seriously ill or ill at all from this accident. The series that I have been tasked with talking about over the next 4 Sundays is conflict. And there are these 4 different parts that have been identified as the things we're going to talk about. Today is the spiritual foundations in Islam. The spiritual foundations of conflict resolution. I think next week is conflict resolution and the youth. The week after that is conflict resolution in our families and our relationships. So things specifically about marriages and stuff like that, and even our personal relationships. And I think the last week is conflict resolution from an intergenerational perspective, right? So how do we manage conflict across these different spaces? You see what happens. We'll talk about those 4 areas, and inshallah, my hope is that we all get something beneficial from it. If there's anyone who is online, who is joining us online, I'll be paying attention to the chat. So anything that comes up, I'll be able to see the questions, and then I'll be able to respond to them throughout the lecture, inshallah. And of course, anyone who has sat through a ta'aleem with me, you know that at any point in time, you're free to ask a question or raise a point of clarification, or even share some insight that you are getting throughout all of this. The goal is for me to talk for about 45 minutes or so, give or take. And whatever we don't cover today, I'll move into next week, right? Because a lot of these things they're all interconnected and related. Okay. Any questions before I get started?
Will this be interactive or will this just be like a?
As interactive as we want it to be, as interactive as we want it to be. I initially thought of workshopping it, right, making it more like a workshop, and then I digressed from a workshop thing. So, but yes, ask questions. I'll ask you questions, and please, my preference is to make it interactive by me leading the way on that. So yes, it will be interactive. Short answer. That did not need that long explanation I just gave. So yes, it will be interactive. I think I need bifocals. So the topic today, right? As I mentioned, spiritual foundations of conflict resolution. Broad outline for the conversation. We're gonna define or look at what conflict means. Then I'm gonna really set this up in a way that we haven't talked about it, or at least I haven't spoken about it before, right? What is the end goal of conflict resolution? So we're gonna spend quite a bit of time on that. I'll bring some examples from the Quran. I'll bring some examples from the life of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And then I'll wrap up, or I'll try to wrap up today, talking about or starting the conversation as to how we move towards the resolution piece, right? That's my goal. So setting all of that's the boundaries for today, inshallah. So usually when I talk about conflict, I spend a whole lot of time defining it, right? I'm not doing that today. I'm skipping the half an hour definition piece of it, right? I'm just going directly to what we call it and how we look at it, and then move into something that's a bit more pragmatic for our time here today. So when we think of conflict, the simplest thing I want you to think of it as is a break in interaction. Like you're interacting and there's a sudden break in it, or there's a challenge or there's a struggle in that interaction you're having with somebody. Let's just use that as a general definition of conflict. And it usually happens because there's a difference in the goals or expectations that people have, right? That's basic definition. That's what we'll use for everything that I'm going to talk about, inshallah, over the next 4 weeks. When we have a conflict with others, we usually see it as some sort of a crisis in the relationship. And I'm using crisis in a very generic way here. And conflict itself, the way we talk about it, having that break in interaction in many cases is not good or bad necessarily. It is just something that happens, right? It's just something that happens. For example, if you see, that clock is wrong, right? Yeah, it's 5:30, right? Okay. So if you see 6:45 and I'm still talking, how are you going to feel? What's going to be going on there? It's 6:45 and I'm still talking. What are things that you're thinking? Hurry up. Wrap it up. If you've watched I can't mention that. You know, the wrap it up clock, right? Wrap it up. What else? What else are you thinking? Amal, you're saying something. What are you saying? Ended already. Right? So that's because that there is a conflict, right? I want apparently to continue talking and you want me to stop, right? So we have a difference in our goals in that moment. So that's what a conflict is, as a quick example of how easily a conflict can emerge. Now, at the same time, it's not that anyone will stand up and say, Imam Kais, wrap this up. We talk, right? No, you're not going to do that, right? No one will necessarily do that, right? But I'll start watching you all and people will start fidgeting. It's like they're watching their clock, they're watching their watches and start moving. And, you know, all of a sudden everyone starts straightening stuff inside of the musalla, right? Inside of the masjid, but that is what lets me know that something else is going on. But there is a conflict, right? Because you're expressing to me in a passive way that, dude, you're going on too long now. Move on, right? Or let's bring an end to this. So that is what a conflict is, right? A conflict is a crisis or a break in our interaction, because at that point in time, when you start doing things differently, I'm realizing the way we were interacting has shifted. So that's the break in interaction. And that break in interaction happens because we have different goals. I want to continue just running my mouth, and you want to move on so that we can get the good iftar food ready to move forward. So if we look at that as the definition for conflict, good. We can see where we might want to go with this, right? So that's what I'll be talking about. How are some of the ways in which these interactions get broken down. So I said I'm going to start off from a different perspective from where I've started in the past, right? That conflict resolution is rooted in this idea of justice. The goal of conflict resolution in Islam, I'm putting forward today, is a movement towards justice more than it is anything else, right? It is, peace is what we talk about. Peace is this outcome that we can get, but really the reason why we strive to get conflict resolved is because in many cases there's some element of justice involved in that, and hopefully by the end of the conversation we'll root that out. So setting up the framework for this, why were we created, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, wa ma khalaqtu al-jinna wal insana illa liya'budun, right? That Allah did not create man and jinn for any reason except to worship him. And everything about us depends on Allah. And it is up to us in our own conscious mind to remember that, right? That whether we remember it or not, we are still dependent on Allah, right? Whether we remember it or not, or whether we acknowledge that consciously or not, we are all dependent on Allah. This is what justice is. Justice is acknowledging what rights are and giving the things their rights. So giving Allah his rights is justice. Giving each other our rights, that's justice. Justice is all about putting things in their right place. So if Allah has created us for no other reason but to worship him, then that there is the epitome of justice. That there's the epitome of justice, right? Where we are consciously acknowledging that we are supposed to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we start giving each other rights, that is the enforcement or us engaging in justice. So if I'm setting that up as a framework, as justice, right, then anytime there's a break in how we give each other rights or how we give Allah rights, then that means we are moving closer towards injustice. So if there's a break in me giving you your rights, it means I'm moving away from justice and moving closer to injustice, right? And that means that if I'm breaking and giving you your rights, there's a chance that conflict is about to emerge or it's already happening. Because no one generally says, I'm not going to give Ibo his rights. But I may not give it to him if we have beef, right? There's something going on, right? No one, I don't wake up and say, you know what? I'm not giving Rahman his rights today. But if Rahman come at me sideways, I may not get, my mind might incline me not to give him his rights. Not saying that's good, but I'm just saying how this whole thing moving towards injustice looks like and how we are linking that to this idea of conflict management. So whatever space we find ourselves in, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala moves us or encourages us to move towards justice. And one of the ways that Allah encourages us to move towards justice, because he's al-adl, right? He's the just. That is the thing that encompasses everything about him, right? It's wrapped up in his rahmah, that he is more merciful than he is, that he will exact his rights from, right? So the adl part of Allah is what really grounds us in most cases, what we really want to pay attention to. So the way that we move towards justice is through peace and reconciliation. The way that we move towards justice is through peace and reconciliation, or in the broader term, conflict resolution. So I'm going to use this now to identify or outline some verses and traditions to set up this spiritual foundation towards conflict resolution. We often hear about this statement, right? I'll start off with, when you hear the word peace, what word comes to mind? When you hear the word peace, what word comes to mind? Oh, sorry, bad question. What Arabic word comes to mind? Salam, right? Yeah, that's a very common Arabic term that we know of that means peace. So in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Anfal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. وَإِن جَنَّهُ لِلسَّلْمِ فَجْنَحْ لَهَا. And if they incline to peace, you do the same. Right? So we have lisalami or lisalmi as the meaning of move towards peace, right? So that's one word that we have that comes out in terms of making peace. But there's another word that comes up in the Quran very frequently when it comes to talking about peace and when it comes to making resolution or when it comes to bringing people together. And that word comes from the root sod lam ha, right? Salaha, right? When you hear amilu solihat, right? So that's the word that comes to mind. Then I'll bring out some other spaces where that emerges in the Quran. So in this case here, where Allah tells us, and if they incline to peace, you do the same. This is where Allah was talking to the believers and saying, hey, if you're in conflict with folks and they move towards peace, what are you commanded to do? Move towards peace as well. Like they cannot move towards peace. Even if I'm in conflict, they cannot move towards peace. And I'm like, well, you did me. I'm still going to fight you. We are commanded that if whoever we're in conflict with moves towards peace, that we are supposed to do the same. You with me? So again, it's moving towards justice, right? Because if you are no longer fighting me and I'm still fighting you, then I'm not treating you right. I'll bring this a bit more local to us. A lot of kids in here, right? So when we talk about laugh at that, yes. So when we talk about moving towards peace, I didn't even know what I was talking about a second ago. What was I saying? Move towards peace, right? That's a statement. So right. So someone, so you're in an argument with someone, and they're like, hey, you know what? I know I did something wrong. I really am sorry. No, y'all can hang. Really. I was just, cool. I did something wrong. I really am sorry. I really need us to find a way to get past this. And you're like, nah, you're doing too much right now. You sit over there, I sit over here, and I'm giving you 3 days. That is not moving towards peace when the other person has tried to move towards peace. Does that make sense? So here, if they incline towards sin, if they move towards it, then we are supposed to move towards it as well. Because again, it is a movement towards justice. And that's how I want us to keep thinking about it. The biggest imperative that we see when it involves other people, right? So that's just us telling ourselves that if I'm having a conflict with you, I'm supposed to move towards peace as you incline towards peace. And of course, although it doesn't say it here, Allah loves those who move towards peace first, right? So although this particular verse or this particular piece I'm pulling out here doesn't say that, we know that Allah loves those who forgive first. Allah loves those who are repentant first. Allah loves those who humble their wings first. So the imperative to move towards peace is there whether the other person does it or we are the ones who think about it first, right? We are supposed to do that. But let's look at this now, and let's look at this now from the perspective of if we see two people in conflict. And this is where Surah Al-Hujurat comes in, right? We are very familiar with verses 9 and 10 in Surah Al-Hujurat. But I'll start off in particular with verse 10. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إنما المؤمنون الإخوة. Right? Verily, all believers are brothers and brethren. Faslihu. Faslihu. So make peace. Faslihu baina akhawaikum. Right? Faslihu baina akhawaikum. So make peace between the two of them, right? And the two of them here is the translation of this or the interpretation of this is if you have two people who are in conflict, the person who is witnessing that, what are we supposed to do? Make peace between them. Right? Again, the command here, right? Faslihu. This is then make peace, right? You are supposed to do it. It is not if you like them, make peace, right? It's like, no, make peace between them because we are brothers. And of course, this means brothers and sisters, right? But we are part of this ummah. So if anyone is in conflict, make peace between them. So when we talk about making peace between people, we have to be very conscious of what that looks like. Because if we are adding fuel to the conflict, then we are not making peace, are we? Really? They did that? Really? What kind of Muslim does that? We're not really moving them towards peace. Fair enough? I'm going to bracket this in terms of if you're in a professional relationship where you're speaking with your therapist or you're speaking with a conflict resolution person or something like that, and they're getting more information out of you to get the full picture, that's something else. But one-on-one, when we're hanging out with our brothers and sisters and we tell them what's going on, and they're just siding with us and getting us even deeper in our feelings about what's going on, then are they moving us towards peace? Because how do you know that you're in conflict? How do you know you're in conflict? What's the first sign? Tension in the interaction. I heard someone say something. Tension. You feel it. You feel it, right? That's how you know you're in conflict. You feel it. You feel it. Right? Qasim? You feel it, right? That's how you know. Right? You know your intention. You know something is wrong because you feel it first. I need my focus. So when we, again, right, this command to make peace, again, in the rest of this verse, it goes on to between your brothers and remain conscious of Allah so that you might get mercy. So as we are moving towards making peace, we have to remember to be conscious of Allah because rahmah comes from that. All right. So we can drink tap water again. That's what the message said. That's what it said. I thought that's what it said. Sorry, I misread it. All right, but it said that if you got it, it said that they tested it and it's no more contaminated. It's just Kukul Punch now. So when we talk about Sword Lamha, right, that definition, right, that word of making peace or making reconciliation, some of the meanings that come out of this that we find it in the Quran means to reform or to make amends. So So in one part of the Quran, I think that's the second message. So one verse in the Quran says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, illa alladhina tabu waslahu." Right? Illa alladhina tabu waslahu. Accepted, however, shall be they that repent and put themselves to rights. So let me put this in context for you. Just before this, Allah had cursed the ones who receive guidance and then corrupted, right? Who receive guidance and then say they hide the guidance or they hide the proofs that Allah has given. And then Allah says, all of those people are cursed except what? Except the ones who repent and then make amends, right? Make amends. Aslahu, make amends. Put things right. So if we know something as the truth and we conceal it, hide it, gaslight about it, the way that we move from that is to repent, tawbah, and then make amends. And there are many different ways in which we make amends in Islam. But this again is we are understanding how the movement towards justice is rooted in this idea of conflict resolution. Or I shouldn't say that. Conflict resolution is rooted in this idea of moving towards justice. That's the way it should be said. Another way we want to interpret this is, or another way we want to understand this is that it's about reconciling and correcting. What is something that the Quran tells us in Surah Al-Baqarah that we should do in preparation for our death? What are we supposed to do? Many of us do it before we go to Hajj. Somebody say pay taxes? Inshallah, we pay taxes. Pay off your debts. Say that again for me. Write your will. Oh, that might sound there. Okay, good. Write your will. All right, so in the Quran, right, in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah reminds us, if, however, one has a reason. So let me back up. Allah tells us that Allah talks about if we before death, in preparation for death, for us to write a will, right? For us to leave a will. And then there's a verse that comes after that that says, if, however, one has reason to fear that the testator, the one who wrote the will, right, has committed a mistake or has intentionally done something wrong in terms of who they bequest stuff to, right? So let's say there are certain ways that we are supposed to write our wills. Let's say this person says, I'm not giving anything to my kids. I'm giving it all to someone else who has no right for that inheritance. Then or something along those lines, right? Or somebody says, I'm not doing anything that is just. The person who survives them, who is just, is allowed to say, no, this is incorrect. The proper way for this to happen is like this. So let me put this into context again. Allah says, if, however, one has reason to fear that the testator has committed a mistake or has done a deliberate wrong, and thereupon brings about a settlement or brings about a reconciliation between the heirs or the ones who are supposed to inherit it, he will incur no sin, because Allah is all forgiving and a dispenser of grace. Why is that even important? Because just before that, Allah condemned the one who, after someone dies, looks at the will and then makes a change. Just before that, Allah condemned the one who, after someone dies, looks at that person's will and says, oh no, I'm going to change this around and I'm going to benefit from it. So Allah cursed that person or people and then said, but the people who are not included in that category are the people who make that change, but they're doing it in the pursuit of what? Justice. They're doing it in the pursuit of justice, because when people die, right, and the will comes up, we have people fighting all the time over who should get what. So this is a case where two heirs come, and two people who are supposed to inherit, they come, and they're fighting over it, and the person who is just is looking at the will and says, well, no, this is wrong. This is not what Allah has ordained. The proper way to do this is like this. That person who is making that change, Allah is saying here, there's no wrong on them, because they are moving towards making peace between those people by moving towards justice. You with me? And again, the command here is faslaha, to make reconciliation. Another understanding of this, right? So again, this is the spiritual foundations of conflict management or conflict resolution, right? Another example of this is where Allah reminds us that among the best of deeds that He has created for man to do, right? Among the best of deeds, or among the deeds which you have enjoined upon man, is goodness towards his parents, right? And many of us are familiar with this verse, right? In pain did his mother bear him, and in pain did she give birth. And her bearing him and his utter dependence on her took 30 months. And so when he attains a full maturity and reaches 40 years, he that is righteous says, O my sustainer, guide me or inspire me so that I may forever be grateful for those blessings of yours which you have graced me and my parents, and that I may do what is right. وَأَنْ عَمَلَ صَالِحًا, so that I may do what is right, yeah, and grant me, so that I may do what is right, that will meet with your acceptance, and grant me righteous offspring. And again, waslih li fiduriati, and grant me righteousness in my offspring. So again, this idea of salaha, right, is coming out in how we look at our kids and how we want to enjoy the rights of our parents. The last example I'm going to give is in Surah An-Nisa, where Allah is speaking about divorce between the husband and the wife. And Allah reminds us, and if a woman has reason to fear that she will be treated unjustly from her husband, or that he might turn away from her, because what used to happen is that they used to leave their wives in limbo in pre-Islamic Arabia, right? They used to just leave them in limbo, say, you know what, I'm not touching you, and then it'll be, so they're not divorcing her, but they're not really staying married to her, so they're just in limbo, right? And Allah was saying that this is unjust. So and if a woman has reason to fear ill treatment from her husband, or that he might turn away from her, it shall not be wrong if the two set things peacefully to the rise between themselves, for peace is best. Rasulhu khairan, and peace is best. So this idea of reconciliation, of justice, of conflict management is rooted in this movement towards justice. And the last thing I want to say on this, I said that was the last one, but the last one I want to share is this. In Surah Al-Baqarah, even when we are making an oath to Allah, it still has to be rooted in justice, right? Allah reminds us, and do not allow your oaths in the name of Allah to become an obstacle to virtue and taqwa and the promotion of peace between men. For Allah is all hearing, all knowing. Let's understand this. So the rationale behind this is, now Abdullah ibn Rawaha, he was a famous prophet, a famous companion, radiallahu anhu. He was a famous companion during the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? We may hear of him referred to as the warrior poet, right? That he was out of all of the poets, he was the one who would actually go to battle. He was one of the first ones to actually stand up to defend the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this particular verse here where it says, and do not allow your oaths in the name of Allah to become an obstacle to virtue and taqwa and the promotion of peace between men, is, according to some of the scholars, this particular verse came down or was sent because Abdullah ibn Rawaha, he said that because his sister married, when the person that his sister married, Abdullah said that I am not going to talk to you anymore. He made an oath, right? He swore by Allah, I am not going to talk to you anymore. And if there's any problems between you and my sister, I'm not going to come to help make peace between it. And I swear by God that I'm not doing that. So he made an oath by God that he was not going to do any of these things. Now, I need to understand how the pre-Islam Arabs took their oaths. Say anything we want to say about them in pre-Islam Arabia. When it came to an oath was serious. An oath was serious. That if I say I'm going to do this, that's what we do it. So he had made a promise. He had sworn that he wasn't going to do X, Y, Z. And even though he invoked God's name in it, Allah said, do not make your oaths that you take in my name prevent you from doing what? Making peace. So even if we try to bring Allah into the middle of it, that cannot prevent us from making peace. Peace is movement towards justice. Y'all with me so far? Peace is the movement towards justice. Because he said, I swore by Allah that I will not do any of these things, meaning that he will not visit his brother-in-law, he will not speak to him, or he will not reconcile between the brother-in-law and his sister. And he said, I swore by Allah that I will not do any of these, and it is forbidden for me not to honor my oath. And then Allah was like, pause. We're not doing that. You're not going to call my name, right? You're not going to invoke my name for injustice, right? And this is consistent in many other spaces in our Quran. Jeez, 6:08 already. All right. So I'll show one example from the Prophet ﷺ, before he was Rasulullah ﷺ. This is in our tradition. This is referred to as Hilful Fudul, right? The Committee for Peace, and this happened when the Prophet ﷺ was still a teenager, right? He was still very young, and among some of the tribes, some of the chieftains in Mecca, they had made an oath to protect people because for 1,000 years the tribes were warring with each other, right? It was just chaos, right? It was literally just chaos all the time. And they realized just how bad it was. So they came together and they made an oath that they're going to protect each other and make sure that people would get their rights in pre-Islamic Mecca. Because again, it was just fighting, it was just war, tribes were just warring with each other. And what happened was, he was about 15 years old, give or take. And there was a clash between the tribes of the Quraysh and some of the other tribes in Arabia. And what happened was, so all of this is around the Battle of Fijar, where the tribes, because they were fighting with each other, it led into this 1,000-year warring, these wars that would erupt over like 1,000 years, right? So it was going on for quite a long time. But something happened. A trader from Yemen came into Mecca and he was doing some trade and there was a conflict with him. It was like the person didn't want to pay him or something like that, right? It was something that he tried to cheat him on. So this guy from Yemen, he went to one of the chieftains and says, yo, we had an agreement that y'all are going to treat us with justice. So what happened was this. A bunch of the chieftains of Mecca gathered in the house of Abdullah Judan's son. And they said that what happened to him, to the person from Yemen, was an injustice, and they're going to set it right. So all of these heads of Mecca, who at various points in time didn't like each other, but they had this treaty, but they had this agreement, they came together and said, what happened here? This is a violation of the agreement that we had. So we are going to establish this agreement that says that we are going to continue to stand up for justice in this space. Why am I sharing this with you? It's because the Prophet ﷺ, he was invited to that gathering at the age of 15. And after he became Nabi ﷺ, he said that if ever, indeed I witnessed this, I'm quoting now. Indeed, I witnessed my uncles, because remember, he was descendant of the leaders of the Quraysh. So they are the ones who were gathered in the house. So this is what the Prophet ﷺ is saying. Indeed, I witnessed my uncles in the house of Abdullah Judan, son, a treaty which is more beloved to me than a herd of cattle. So he's saying during his time, before he was Nabi, he witnessed an agreement, a move towards peace, a move towards justice that is more beloved to him than a herd of cattle. That alone should tell us how important it is. But he says something else afterwards. He says, now in Islam, if I was asked to be part of that same agreement, what would he do? He would be part of it again. Right? So I'm using this example from the time of the Prophet ﷺ to show exactly how we look at conflict resolution and conflict management. That is this movement towards justice. That when people are being violated, right? When people are in conflict, there's a chance that rights are being violated or rights may get violated. So we make peace either to prevent rights from getting violated, or to prevent them or to stop them if they're already being violated. That's why we need to make peace. Fair enough? Abu Dawood, may Allah be pleased with him, said that the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, shall I not inform you of something more excellent in degree than our sunnah fasting, our prayer, and our sadaqah? The people replied, yes, Prophet of Allah. He said, it is putting things right between people, spoiling relations, severing relations is the shiva, is a thing that takes off from our good deeds. So something that is more beloved than all of the voluntary good deeds that we do is making the relations right between people. There's a spiritual foundation that moves us towards creating peace. Any pause here? Questions, insights? Anyone wants to share, jump, say anything, of anything? Please.
Earlier you had mentioned about how you should always try to move towards the peace, and to not do that or to kind of say I need my 3 days, it's probably not the best way. But what if sincerely in your heart, you probably need more than 3 days, but you want to take your 3 days because you want to forget the person, but you need that space to do that.
Right. You
need that time to do that.
Yes. So thank you. Really good question. Can I answer that in maybe like 2 or 3 different ways? So the first thing is I want to take the 3 days piece that we often use and reframe it for us if at all possible, right? It is there not as a recommendation to use, but as a limitation on how long we should go without speaking to each other. So that's the first reframing I want to do of it, right? And this is not to say that we don't need it, right? But I just want to make sure we look at it in the, hopefully in the way it was intended, right? Not as a recommendation, but more as a limitation, that we should not go beyond this time without doing this. Not that I need to take this time or I should take this time to do it, but moreover, don't go beyond that time, else now you're in violation, right? So that's the context for it. Now the second part of your question. Now another response to your question. Do we need time, right, within that 3 days framework, right, using that now as a framework? Is it sometimes that we need time to really settle ourselves and get things right? 100%. 100%, right? So when I train on conflict management, right, one of the styles of conflict management is what we call avoidance, right? Avoidance can be sometimes intentional or unintentional. The intentional use of avoidance is exactly what you're raising here. Intentional use of avoidance says that, you know what? I'm not going to engage you directly until I'm able to manage my emotions, until I have a right frame of mind to have the conversation. It is not that you're not moving towards peace. It is that you're choosing a more successful way to move towards peace, and that is fine. Inshallah, Allahu Alam. That is fine, right? Because you're not saying, I don't care about this relationship. You're not saying, I am going to hate you for the rest of whatever. What you're saying is, I know I'm not in the right frame of mind right now to have this conversation, to engage you. So what I need is some time to do that. That is within the boundaries of our faith. But we have a delimiter, right? Don't cross this threshold. But taking the time from a very conscious perspective to say, this is the way I can make peace. If I really want to make peace, it's fine. Yeah, that's okay. Right? That is perfectly, inshallah, okay. As long as the intention is that we are moving towards peace. And folks, peace doesn't always mean that we are buddy-buddy. Again, snaps today. Okay. All right. You know when you're on fire. Right? All right. Peace doesn't always mean that everything is buddy-buddy. Right? Like, we smile, and we go by sad, it's close. We go by Manakicha, whatever, right? That's not what peace is always, right? If we're looking at peace as a movement towards justice, then peace really could mean that what is the way in which I can make sure that I'm giving you your rights? And if the way for me to give you your rights is that we no longer are in this close, intimate relationship, right? And when I say intimate, I mean friends or marriage or whatever it is, right? That we are no longer in this relationship because me being in this relationship with you is me taking away your rights or me not being able to give you your rights. Then the way we make peace might be to, you know what? Our relationship needs to shift a bit. Our relationship needs to look differently. Because then I can better obey my Lord. I can better help you obey your Lord. And this now is peace. Right? This now is reconciliation, because before we agreed on that, we were just dogging each other out. Every time I see you, your face long and then that's not peace. That's not reconciliation. You know, like in the 14 pages of stuff I had to talk to you about today, right? I'm on page 3, I think. We one of the things that we speak about is how when we are talking about movement towards peace, or this idea of creating peace in our relationships, if I am treating you unjustly, or I'm not giving you your rights, or I'm not doing the things that I'm supposed to do for you or to you, right? If I'm not doing those things, then that is not justice. It cannot be. So if I don't have the capacity to do right by you now, and the best way for me to do that is the best way for me to give you your rights is to say, hey, you know what? The rights that I can give you, for me to give you your rights is for us not to be in this relationship the way we were in it yesterday. Is that then Aloha? But that should not be the goal, right? The goal should not be to make our relationships weaker. The goal should be that I'm doing that so that I can make the bond that we have, even though it's different, stronger. So the goal is not to weaken the bonds, but the goal is for us to make stronger bonds, because I might be able to have a stronger bond with you in this way as opposed to this way. Because justice has to be that we are preserving the sanctity of each other. Zaina.
So in the example that you used earlier, the person who went towards peace state, and the first thing the statement was that they took accountability and ownership over what they did wrong. What if the person is like being nice to you and kind to you, but they never took accountability, responsibility, or just
Good question. So
You say to me be your, to you be your way and me be mine?
So that's one option, right? That's one option we have. When I work with this, one of the questions I ask is this: is an apology necessary for you to forgive someone?
It helps.
No, it helps.
It helps. Is it necessary for us to forgive someone?
No.
Wait, okay.
So the question for those of you online, the question is an apology necessary for, no, the question I'm asking is an apology necessary for us to forgive someone? But the original question was, if I'm understanding you correctly, then right, the original question was, what if the person doesn't take accountability, right, and doesn't try to make amends, right?
Address what happened. What if they just try to completely ignore it and act like it didn't happen? That's mine.
Yes. So now we are asking that's a slightly different thing, right? Because we need to now understand, does that person have the competency to do that? Because conflict resolution is a competency, right? That requires self-awareness and then the skill. So self-awareness is a skill that we can develop, right? And then it requires a skill to be able to engage that conflict resolution piece. So if that person doesn't have the competency to really develop, to engage in self-awareness, then how do we hold them to that standard? I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm just saying that there are more questions that we, so, you know, in a session like this, right, you can only answer it in generalities, right? So that's one question I need to ask. Is the person that we're dealing with, is the person that you're talking about, what have they done, or how self-aware are they? And if in all of our existence with them, all of your interaction with them, they're not demonstrating a certain level of self-awareness, then it's possible that that is not a competency that they have developed. And now the issue is moving towards peace might actually be helping them get the tools and resources to develop the competency in self-awareness. Yeah, that's my class. That's a different class. Oh no, the question is, how do you do that? How do you help them develop self-awareness? You all are familiar with the term, right? Emotional intelligence. The first component in emotional intelligence is self-awareness. So that's a whole thing we can talk about a different time. But it's there, it's a competency. I saw two hands in the back. Ayana, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking that if we broaden our view of an
an apology. An apology doesn't necessarily have to be a verbal acknowledgement. Depending on the relationship between two people, it could be the action towards making amends. And if they are acting in a kind and righteous way, there is some recognition that they know what they did was wrong, they need to get back within your good graces. But that requires a very expansive view.
No, but it's a valid point, right? Because remember we started off, right? Those who repent and make amends. And we all have, so now I'll bring in another contemporary thing that we are all familiar with, love languages. Many of us are familiar with with the concept of love languages, right? The Gottman book that gets recommended, that dude, yeah? All right. Your love language might be giving gifts, right? If that's the thing that you like to receive, then when there's a conflict, most likely your first thing to do would be to go out and buy her flowers. If she likes flowers, you give gifts. She may not hear "I'm sorry" from you, but she may come and the whole bed is littered with flowers, right? There's a flower stream from the door all the way up, because your thing is giving gifts. So to take what Sister Yana said, yes, right? If we think about the ways that people show accountability, it may not always be verbal, but that's tough. Because for some of us, and for many of us, especially in this space that we're in now, hearing that verb, and we talk about affirmation, all that stuff, right? Affirmations, everything, right? So the verbal stuff is really important. So not hearing it is a challenge for us. I know for me it is. I want you to tell me that you messed up and you take one. I want that. But I'm also understanding that if they don't say I'm sorry, but they showing it, put flowers for when I walk in the door, that might be a sign of an apology. I saw a hand up here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if you might be answering that both out. But you started by connecting with calling for peace by saying that it's incumbent upon the third person in a conversation to make peace between the two that are in confrontation. What are some practical tools that you could mention for that third party to be?
How do you do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, folks, this is what I'm going to just bullet. Let me jump to the end here. It's tough to jump to the end without giving context. So the question is, what are some practical ways that third person can help move the two parties in conflict towards peace, right? Or towards reconciliation? The first thing that we have to ask ourselves is, am I the right person to help do that? Because if both of you have a conflict, but even as my day one, that. And I come to you and I'm like, well, I understand what's going on. How are you going to look at me like, y'all grew up together? You may not be, right? You might look at me from the jump and say, you may not be the best person to help make peace here. Because I'm not saying that's right, but I'm saying that that's how you might view me. So me as a third person, before I even go try to make peace, I need to ask myself, me trying to make peace, will this move them towards it? Or will this add another layer to the conflict? And if it will add another layer to the conflict, then maybe what I need to do is my way of helping them find peace is to maybe find someone else who can help them do it, right? So this is where we start talking about conflict of interest and all that type of stuff in the professional space, because I need to be, to a certain extent, depending on it, and this depends on the type of conflict, right? I need to be seen as somewhat impartial. if that's how I'm coming into it. Another thing is that I need to check my ego before I try to help them. Because guess what? How many of you have ever tried to intervene in a conflict and you got cussed out? Yeah. And then what you doing now? No, you fighting with them. Like, what? I just trying to help you. You said you need to check. So before you even get involved in it, you need to ask yourself, if this doesn't go the way I expect it to go, am I in the right frame of mind to take that L and walk away? Can I? Because if you can't, then may not be the right space for us to intervene.
I have to go in a minute, so I want to hurry with this question.
Oh, sure.
Okay, something you can help me with the stuff I've been seeing recently, a bunch of sirens all of a sudden the last 3-4 years. Do you believe, from your experience where you at, most of the violent conflict we're seeing now, is it, percentage-wise, is it agriculture or is it the third person instigating it? Just from what you hear and see based on where you're at, over, like started 4 or 5 years ago, still going on?
So there's a question before you run out. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
I'll say this again.
So, it is all of that, right? It's all of that. So now I'm bringing a bit local. When we look at the spaces where a lot of these conflicts emerge, right? I don't know how many of you have heard of the 57 Blocks project that is now the 72 Blocks project or anything like that. How many of you are familiar with that in Philadelphia here? Somewhat. So the 57 Block project, right? What they look at is, this is where they map the highest crime areas in Philadelphia, right? And they narrow it down to 57 blocks, but now it's expanded to like 60 something or 72 blocks. And what they realize is that all of these blocks are blocks that have been historically disinvested from. Disinvested, like people who had wealth took it out of these areas with other things, right? Whether it be the bank, red line, whatever have you, right? But it's various forms of disinvestment happen in these areas. So to answer your question, right? It is not just a third party. It is not just ego. It's not just any of that, right? Part of it is poverty is a big cause of this, right? Lack of opportunity, lack of options. It's not just family, right? So if I grew up in this area and my family has not seen options for decades or generations, then it's quite possible that I may also not see options as well. And if I'm not seeing options and I'm seeing one option, then that might be the choice I would make. So that's one part of it, right? If I lack resources to do something different, then that could be another part of it. If I am not even involved in anything, but someone sees me and thinks that I looked at them funny, and that's why I'm involved in something now, that could be something else, right? But the reason why they're thinking the way they're thinking, the reason why they have that warped thinking, could be for all of the reasons I just mentioned, or something completely different. So I hear the question, Brother Myron, I hear the question, but it's not one answer. And this is why, now I'm going to get a tad bit political here. This is why anyone who is trying to come with a one solution approach, it fails, right? This is a solution that requires businesses, spiritual leaders, governmental leaders, community leaders, individual. This is a solution. This is a problem that requires all of those pillars to actually address it, because there is no one problem that is causing the violence that we're seeing here right now.
So on that note, thank you. I appreciate it. So we as Muslims, like all of us here today, would you say, in your personal opinion, that we should put that as a priority of finding some way to try to support this effort? Because from what you're saying, it sounds like there's something Muslim Rasulullah someone would be the first.
There's some kind of Socratic setup you just put me in here. And when I say that, I mean, like, A plus B is this, so then it has to be C, right? So if you say this, then you must do that. So I'm going to take that and respond to it like this. The only thing we cannot do is nothing. But all of us will not be able to get directly involved in it. Meaning this. if I, at least within my immediate circle, right, if I can help folks see something different, it may not be anybody who is out there, but they may have a friend who might be doing something, and because I'm helping them, they may remember a word that they can say to that person. So the solution is not that we all suddenly get involved in it, because that is not how humanity works. We are all not doctors, lawyers, and sanitation engineers. That's not how it functions. We are all not electricians. Some of us mess things up, right? But we all have a part that we can play. So if I know that, hey, you know what? Maybe what we can do is, our community has, because literacy is also a part of some of this too, right? Our community has a space where we can have an adult GED class, or some sort of a program for GED for students who did not finish high school. We do that. Or right now, there's an organization near Philly who, one of the things that they're doing now, or one of the things that they consistently do, and I'm naming it because I think they're doing something really beneficial with the youth, right? Things that they do: donate pet food to families in our area. Pet food. Like, we'll say, how does that even deal with violence, right? How does that even address it? People are in need. If we're out there helping, if we're out there giving, this is changing the dynamics of the community. One of the things they recently did was to go paint, to go help beautify the neighborhoods. There's research that shows that the space in which we live has an impact on how we view our lives and how we treat each other. Plant, all of these things, right? So what I'm saying is that there is no one thing to do, but the one thing I'll say is that none of us should say that we cannot do anything. There is something that we can do in some way, shape, or form. But then I don't want to take away from the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? That if we see something that needs to be changed, and we all know this, hands, mouth, or minimally, I can at least see it in my heart. So the way I might change that is, I see it, I hear somebody say something about it, I'm like, yeah, we need to figure out how to shift this. And if that's the only thing I can say, and that's me hating it in my heart, then alhamdulillah. Because at least I'm not saying, you know what, I don't care about it. At least I'm not apathetic towards it. Did that answer the question? A bit? Yeah?
Just find what you fit.
Find where we fit? Yeah. Fit in where we can. Sure. Right? That's it.
So, you're saying moving towards peace. I'm just trying to make sure my notes are right.
Oh boy.
Moving towards peace. Moving towards justice is moving towards restoring rights.
Yes.
Moving towards peace helps move towards the mercy of the Lord.
Yeah. So
So my question. So after you have restored rights to the person, you're moving towards peace. How do you move towards rebuilding trust after you restore the rights in the process? And you're trying to maintain peace. Because sometimes you can wrong a person, and in the midst of you restoring the rights, you may give them their rights back and fix that relationship. But it's that feeling that you have there, not being able to trust the person, you need still to be present. So how do you
good question. So the question is, for those of you, just to say it out loud, so how do you rebuild trust even after you've started to restore the rights, right? So because we know that trust is the foundation of any relationship, right? That's a thing that all relationships are built on. So the first thing is consistency, right? That's really the first thing and almost like the main thing. So restoring the rights is the first step. So the fact that you've started focusing on restoring the rights, that is the first way to start rebuilding trust, right? Because not giving them their rights, trust has been lost, is distrust, right? So you giving them their rights. They are not looking at you as, oh, you're the godsend in this moment, right? But it's like, all right, you know what, fine. You're doing that, okay, fine, no. But if you are now consistent in your treatment of them in a good and elevated way, this is how you start rebuilding trust. Because remember, the reason why trust gets lost is because people are not feeling safe. Trust or distrust is a representation of a lack of safety. Whatever that safety is, psychological, physical, emotional, whatever it is, spirit, whatever it is, right? A loss of trust means that there's some aspect of safety that is no longer being preserved. So if now, when this person comes to you, they're feeling safe, right? Meaning that something is going on and they pop off on you. And part of your way of restoring trust is that you have now learned how to manage your reactions differently. And they are popping off and you're like, you know what, I hear you and I'm going to make that shift. So now they're realizing that the reactions they used to get from you before, they're no longer getting it. So that is starting to rebuild some of that trust because they're going to start seeing you a bit different. Oh, I said, okay, all right. But that really is that's just one thing that is coming to mind as we're talking about it, right? So the ways in which you rebuild trust, one is consistency. One is paying attention to something we call attribution or misattribution, where we look at the thing that somebody has done and we attach the most negative meaning to it. So if let's say somebody who's broken trust with you, right? And they come and they do something, or they question something that you've said. Remember, in that moment of you giving them their rights, you have also lost some trust with them too, right? So they question something that you said or something that you did. One of the things that you might is like, I'm trying to do the right thing here. Why can't you just understand that? Because in that moment, you're also attributing their questioning of your action to something negative. So one of the ways that we need to go about rebuilding trust is to check for where we are attributing negative intentions to something that somebody is doing because we're in conflict with them. And those are two things. And there are other things, but some of these things can get more specific depending on the situation and when we look at the situation. But I hope those two things can possibly start us in a positive direction. All right. Sidi, I'm just naming this, right? Y'all told me earlier on, when it's 5:45, you're going to start acting certain ways. 6:45. When it's 6:45, you're going to start letting me know that I'm violating your rights. All right. So I'm going to take the questions, but I'm just letting you all know that we are approaching 6:45. So I'll take one more question and then.
You got 2 minutes.
That's the only person who's allowed to do that in this room. The only person. Yes, it is. Yes.
What did you say? What was the question?
The question was, is this being recorded? So that was an easy question. Thank you, Brother Siddiq. I appreciate that very, very much. There's a question online. What if both parties involved in conflict make agreements and attempt to resolve, but one or both do not keep their word? Actions, words do not match, causes more conflict. How would you advise a resolution? Part of it is the consistency piece. Listen, I'll just name this, right? Things that I was going to talk, that we could talk about today, right? How we violate norms and expectations, uncertainty, the role that shaitan plays, deception, incites to anger, things that keep us in conflict or prevent us from resolving, when we are more absorbed in our own thinking, when we engage in anger, when we have pride, when we are dishonest, when we engage in personal attacks, when we have what we call trained incapacities, right? Incapacities, where we learn something that's ineffective and we keep doing that ineffective thing over and over again. So I'm mentioning those things, not really to give you any answers, but to say that all of that is what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks. I'm going to take some of the stuff I didn't touch on here today, right? And when we talk about relational conflict, I'm going to bring some of that back as to why we have problems resolving the conflict within our families and the conflict in our marriages. So the person who asked that question online, short answer is those things that I mentioned, and I'll get into more of those things in the next couple of weeks, inshallah. All right, as we wrap up, Just blurt out things that landed well for you today. What are some things that landed well for you or you're leaving with today? Anyone?
3 days is a recommendation. It's not a recommendation, but a limitation.
3 days is a limitation, not necessarily a recommendation.
There's skills we may need to acquire to be able to do conflict resolution.
Right. That's conflict resolution, a competency. We can upskill ourselves in it. What else?
Conflict resolution might not be in your love language.
Right. The approach to conflict resolution that the other person is using may not be in your love language or in your language that you understand best. Yes.
Before you go to help someone or help two people in a conflict, you have to think about, if you're actually helping them.
Right. Before you intervene in a conflict involving others, ask yourself if I am the right person to do that. And that's when we start checking our pride.
Make sure the person that you're in the conflict with is self-aware enough to know within this step before you judge them by your own standards. You didn't say that?
No. I didn't say that.
That was a good one. Explain it.
I didn't say that. No. I'm not claiming that. No. I self-aware. I ain't doing that one. No. That's my self-awareness. I ain't claiming that one.
Peace doesn't always manifest itself in a buddy-buddy type of way.
Peace may not always manifest itself in a buddy-buddy type of way. I'm sorry, Sister Yana. Say what you said again because I want to repeat it for others to say no. Okay.
You may not get your formal I'm sorry.
Huh?
You may not get the formal I'm sorry.
You may not get the formal I am sorry, right? And so I'll say that, I'll take that and say the ones who are wronged, you may not get that, but the ones who are doing the wronging, you should strive to do that. Right? Because in each conflict is a test for both parties involved, or all the people involved. It's a test for all of us. There's no interaction we have in our lives that isn't a test from Allah. Because there's no interaction we have in our lives that isn't a test from Allah. Even this interaction right here is a test from Allah for each and every single one of us. Because there is a way we can go about it and a wrong way we can go, a right way and a wrong way we can go about it, or a preferred way and a dispreferred way we can go about it. Dispreferred is not a word. I'm just using it for right now. There are ways we can go about it. So it's a test. Because we are always making choices, yes? As long as we are making choices, there's a test involved in that.
For the person that makes the choice and the person who the choice is given to.
Always. As we wouldn't have been given two highways. There's always a choice to be made. And with a choice, there's always a test. And with that, brothers and sisters, I'm going to end today. Go, Sister Ro.
I just wanted to share one thing
Please.
about the way people express their emotions or their love. During my travels in West Africa, I was in the desert in the bush with people's villages. When I get there, people would bring buckets of water, put it in my room. They would bring like food and put it in my room. I'm like, at first I was like, why are you getting all this food? And the sheikh said, this is
how
the way
they
they
show love.
show
Yes.
love.
Yes.
Food and water.
Yes.
Love.
Yes.
You're in the desert.
Yes. 100%, right? When we do intercultural communication, one of the things that we look at is how emotions get expressed, and they vary across cultures.
Yeah.
Right? They vary across cultures. So there's some cultural relevance to how we see emotions and behaviors, practice and stuff like that. But again,
I just wanted to share that.
no, I appreciate it. This is a
We take money, we take flowers.
or even saying I'm sorry, right? That's a very, very us thing. Right? That's very localized and Europeanized in one way, shape, or form, right? But they're very, very different in other spaces.
Yeah.
So, folks, with that being said, I appreciate you tolerating the conversation today. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to benefit from everything that we encounter that is good in this month of Ramadan. I pray that we continue to grow closer and tighter with each other in our families and our communities. And I pray that we strive to give each other the level of justice that the Prophet ﷺ and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to give to each other. Ameen, ameen, ameen. We'll close up with Surah Al-Asr. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. آمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. About to be.